Charlie Binkley. A look at the life of one of Nashville's certainly most popular stock car drivers. Charlie Binkley, even as a teenager through his young years, he was inspired, wanted to drive a race car. Nothing seemed to be on his mind but driving a race car. I believe even back in the 1941, when you see him standing here in this little jumpsuit, I believe he had that inspiration in him even back then, because we did have some people that were racing back then. Born the fifth child of a family of 12 children, Charles was always a go-getter. He always wanted to get out there and go. He always liked the excitement, always liked doing things. Even back in the early days of our lives, as you can see here, we sit on these little soapboxes and either run them down the hill over on Fern Avenue at almost at dangerous speeds, and just a pile of junk, but we drove them anyway. And either that or we ran them around the old croquet court up at the Meridian Park. It was just a great time in children's lives. Children these days wouldn't be allowed to have that kind of fun, because you can see we had no protective equipment whatsoever on our head and nothing on our knees. We ran with shorts on, man. A short distance away from my home, there was a place called Pappy Oates Garage, and as you can see, it's sitting out front, plain as day, just a short distance from the school that we attended. There they sit, the race cars of the day. I mean, they was the envy of the kids around it. We went and hung around old Pappy Oates Garage quite a bit. Back in that time, the Speedway always had lots of other activities, such as the micro midget races, which we loved. And even in that time, we had a cousin by the name of Ray Davenport. He was a legend in his own mind. He was the king of the rollover. He rolled a car over more than anybody that entire time he was racing. But the real inspiration behind Charles's driving activities was a fellow by the name of Frank Reed. Frank was he was a go-getter. Boy, he from the time he hit that racetrack to the time he was unfortunately killed, he was always up front, running up front and going strong. And with that in mind, we built a car. Charles and a boy named George Bunny Monday built a car, and we painted blue and white as Frank Reed's car and put a 25 on it. Well, we showed up at the racetrack with this car, and Mr. Don Holt told us, "Well, son, y'all can't run that number on that car. It's been retired." Of course, we didn't know anything about that. We thought that was in another class of people, another class of cars. But after we got there, we said, "Well, what we're going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. Let's just paint a 1 in front of the 25 and let it be 125. Maybe they'll let us run that for a while." And they did. And that car was so dangerous. I think it had one roll bar in it or something, that my brother Roy, as you can see in this picture right here, he decided, well, before Charlie gets killed in that thing, I better build him another car. And he did. He built him a beautiful little 46 Ford coupe, had a little flathead Ford engine in it, and we ran the whole 1961 season, I believe it was, 1962 season, and never won a race with it until the very, very end of the season. Charles ran everywhere in the southeast in that little car. Every time people seen it coming, they said, "Well, looked like we'd get to run second tonight," because he ran Huntsville, as you can picture right here, as he the passenger fell on the inside, and he ran everywhere that you could think of back then. That little car was just a bomb. I'm telling you, it would fly. We called it the Blue Streak back then, and it was a beautiful little car. As you can see here, if you can get it up big enough to see it, Charles was ranked 4th in the all-time most popular driver ever to race at the Fairgrounds Speedway. He was always very popular in two ways. Either people loved him or they booed him. Loved him or booed him all the time. He won so many races right in a row. At one point, we had 2 cars. Jimmy Crosland, my brother-in-law, drove one, and of course Charles drove the other one. They, for many, many, many years, they would run side by side, run nose to tail. One would finish first, and one would finish second. Most of the time it was Charles finishing first. Here's a picture of the whole crew, with both those beautiful little cars. Both of them painted identical. They looked just exactly alike. And you had to be careful not to get them mixed up on the racetrack, which was done many, many times. Here's a close-up of the pictures. To the left is Jimmy Crosland, Roy Binkley, Ray Binkley, Billy Binkley, and of course Charlie. This little car, as I said, had won. I think we got the final count that I was able to come up with was 105 races ran at the Speedway in 3 years he ran it. Jimmy Crosland won at least one race. Charlie just went on and on and on, and people were just so tickled when they seen that little blue car. That little left front wheel there, especially in the first season, he would lift it way up off of the ground when he come out of the turn, and I'm sure that wasn't making one handle. He was accredited with winning in 1963, I believe 1961 and 63 points championship in the hobby division at the Fairgrounds Speedway. And you just look around this car, and it's pretty evident that he didn't stay in the back very often. He won, like I say, he amassed close to 100 victories. These are only the trophies that Charlie had here, and Roy and all of them didn't bring their trophies to get that picture made. Here's some of Ray's children, even with Gary Binkley involved, standing around the car after it had won a bunch of races, just a bunch of races. I think it's 60 of them right here. Now we look at, sometime it got torn up, and so they had to repair it. There was a front end knocked off of it there, and it still looked good. The old car always looked real good. And, here's a familiar sight with Charlie out front and Walter Wallace chasing him. As you'll see that in several pictures throughout this narration here. The old car kind of got to looking rough toward the end of the end of its days, but believe it or not, we sold that car to a guy down in Huntsville, Alabama, and he ran that car for 2 more years and still won every single race he run it in. And here's Charles winning one of the very first races that he ever won. He and Ray and Roy, along with Forrest Prince, the flagman. Here's Forrest Prince actually giving Charles the flag for the very first race he ever won, which, like I say, is at the end of the 1962 season. 1962 season. Here's Charlie in Huntsville, Alabama, where he won quite a few races. He would go down there, like I say, and these people would say, "Well, here comes them Binkley boys again. We're gonna get to finish second tonight." Charles had some pretty bad fights because they didn't like him coming down and taking the wins away from him every week. There's another picture of him receiving a trophy from the flagman there in Nashville. Here he is with another one. All these are All these are in Huntsville, Alabama. And he was a terror there. He was a terror. And he had so, like I say, several fights with several different guys down there because they didn't like that idea of him coming in and taking it. And here's an early picture of one of the cars, a brand new I believe 1963, when this was taken, after we had switched it over from the 126 car over to the 125 car. Jimmy quit shortly after running one season, and we took the 126 car, which was a much better car, and switched it over to become the 125, which he ran the rest of its life. Here we see Herb Lewis, the flagman at the Fairground Speedway, presenting yet another trophy to Charlie, and for another win. He won every race but two in the 1962 season. And here's a picture of the brothers again, along with Herb Lewis, after yet another win. Then it come time to change. We had ran and done all we could do at that point. So now it's come time to change. So in 1964, they started what was called a late model modified division. Charlie and my brothers built a car, a 1955 Chevrolet, showed up at the racetrack with it, not painted, of course. It was always running late, it seemed like. And we got to the racetrack, and there was, we unfamiliar with this kind of a car and this kind of a power. I mean, this car had a lot of power. It ran primarily on the quarter mile. As you can see, he's around backwards here, the first race. But from that point on, beginning from that point, he won 6 consecutive feature races. Every Saturday night, they would even if they put him in the rear of the field, he would come forward. Here's the pictures, of course, of the whole family after he had made such a name for himself. And here's a picture of, I believe this is the flagman in Birmingham, where in 1965, where he won a bunch of races in Birmingham. A lot of people don't realize, but Charles was credited with winning over 300 races in his little short career. Of course, every now and then you get banged up. Here's a picture here of the back end knocked off of the car after somebody had got into him, and I don't know of him ever causing a wreck himself. Here's another one of somebody into the back end of it. That's Jolie Johnson and Friday Hassler sitting there, the 2 cars with him, and there's another one in that involved you can't see. But they always ran real good, especially in this little 55 Chevrolet. There again, it was the terror. It was just like the little 62 Chevrolet. I mean, the little Ford Coupe. It was a terror. Here they are again. Charlie Binkley and Walter Wallace battling it out for position. Charlie on the inside and Walter on the outside. They had a constant rivalry between the two, although they were really the best of buddies. Here's a lineup